Have you read the Kick-Ass comic series, or have you seen the Kick-Ass movie? Well, regardless what your answer is, I'm Comic Casper and welcome back my fellow comic book friends to another spoiler-free review, as best as I can make it, of the Kick-Ass comic series. So let's kick it! Alright, so to give you a bit of an insight, this is the Kick-Ass Collected Edition, which is composed of 8 issues. It is written by Mark Millar with artwork by John Romita Jr. It is the entirety of the first series, and I say the first because there's a few that follow this one, and you can look at those as sequels per se. The story follows a young man by the name of Dave Lizevsky. He goes to high school, he's not very popular, he's a bit of a dork like myself. He loves comic books. In fact, he's extremely obsessed. He unfortunately lost his mother at the age of 14, which I think is about a year or two before the story takes place, and his father, who works as a prison guard, is still grieving of the loss of his wife. The son, Dave Lizevsky, starts to fantasize and think about what would it be like to be a hero in real life. And he starts to flirt with that idea more and more. Eventually, he starts to make this into a reality by creating a costume for himself. He gets some weapons for himself, and before you know it, he hits the pavement and comes up with a name for himself eventually as well. And the kinds of things that you think would happen when you try to be a hero are well depicted here. And as you can imagine, the consequences would be quite dire, and it would come with a little bit of comedic value too. John Romita Jr., the artist, does a fantastic job with depicting the story. It moves along at a nice pace, and that is finally complemented by the writing of Mark Millar. The 8 issues that are in this series move along very swiftly. I managed to read this in a single sitting. I mean, granted, it's not very long, but it's very engaging, and I think pacing is half the magic, but also the story kept me very engaged. There's a lot of tense moments, and to my surprise, there is some epic ultra violence, which you just kind of don't see coming, because the beginning of the story is, you know, pretty mundane. Nothing really happens. It's about a young man who's going to high school, and when he tries to tackle the world by becoming a hero, well, things go south quite quickly. But I'm not going to spoil any more for you there. I want you to check it out for yourself. Now, what did I think of it? Well, I really enjoyed it. So much so that I want to jump into some of the other series as well, which I have in fact, and as you guys probably saw in my recent comic book haul, I managed to get Hit Girl, Kick-Ass 2, and Kick-Ass 3, of which all of them I'm probably going to binge read, and if you're interested, I will talk about those too. Our protagonist bumps into a whole bunch of different characters within the story, you know, be it bad guys, be it allies, and there's some neat twists along the way as well, as you'd probably expect, and it's all finally jam-packed into these 8 issues. How does this comic book series compare to the movie? Well, when it comes to the movie, you know, it's got some advantages, especially when it comes to action sequences. They can get quite creative, they can do some very impressive stuff, and I find that's what they did for the most part in the movie. Obviously, when it comes to a comic book series, everything is quite static, and you gotta let your imagination fill in the blanks. You gotta let it run wild. So perhaps if you're not into comics to begin with, then yeah, obviously the movie's gonna make more sense and you're gonna love it a lot more. But in terms of the content in itself, I think there's some little twists that happen in here that are a little bit better, and I think there's some outcomes that hit me just that little bit harder in here. And I understand that they couldn't take that into the movie because they wanted to capture as broad of an audience as they possibly could. When it came to the age classification, I get it, you want to pull in a larger audience. Therefore, I think the comic book series has a little bit more mature content. And if you're into that, you'll probably might enjoy the comic book that little bit more. But I gotta say, the movie did a lot of things right. It was trying to stay as truthful and as faithful to the comic series as it could, obviously toning some things down. And therefore, both of these have their own merits. If you ask me which one I would prefer better, because I'm a purist and because I'm all about that source material, I'm gonna give it to the comic book series. Even though I did see the movie first of all, and I thought it was great, I thought it was fantastic. Not so much the second one, but the first one definitely gets a thumbs up. But my heart goes out to the comic book series. It's where the initial idea came about, and it gets a little bit more insane in the end, which I loved, and it will make great sense to you if you read it or if you already have read it. The comic book was a lot of fun. It was really a big eye-opener on the kind of things that would take place if you attempted to be a hero in this day and age. I mean, things would get pretty wild very quickly, let's be honest. And I recommend this to people who love a good hero story, even though it is as grounded as it can possibly get. Keeping in mind, there is a lot of mature content in here, explicit violence and a bit of sexual themes. Keep that in mind when you're buying this comic book. But anyway, that was my quick overview of the comic book series. I loved it just that little bit more than the movie, and I want to hear from you guys if you have read it. And also, thank you so much for watching this video. Hit it with a like if you enjoyed it and a dislike if you hated it, and I will hit you up with some more comic book content soon, so take care.